Welcome to episode 9 of Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm Tom Flynn.
And I'm Chris Baker. We're going from the beginning and looking at what made Canada's premier superhero team work, what didn't work, and taking a romp through a lesser read but much loved corner of the 616.
So a couple quick notes before we get started. One is I might sound a little different, and that is because I've been pretty sick this week. So apologies if this is not the voice to your liking, and if this is the voice to your liking, enough of you like it, I guess, I don't know, I'll abandon my allergy meds, expose myself to random things, whatever. But second note, during our Why Not Have a Drink, our inaugural Why Not Have a Drink episode, we should have used they, them pronouns when referring to Emma Corrin, and our apologies for not doing that at the time.
In this episode, we're going to dig into issues 11 and 12 of Alpha Flight. These issues represent the capstone to the first dozen issues of Alpha Flight and tie the whole thing together. In a change of pace, we aren't going to ping-pong around and reveal details before they're revealed on the page. We're actually going to try to recreate some of the tension of reading the story, and that tension will build and build and build until the very last page.
No backup stories covered here, dear listeners. In these issues, and just a quick note, Chris wouldn't let me read this next bit until we were recording, so here goes. In these issues, we will pull together the threads of the unconnected interludes that have been popping up for a while and lace them together to tie the supportive shoe that is Alpha Flight's defining story. So I hope you all enjoyed that little bit of poesy as much as I did. I really like the supportive shoe. That's a metaphor I don't think has existed before this exact moment in time, but here we are.
Doesn't it just feel comfy? It's like an old pair of Chucks or something.
Sure. We are going to meet several characters that will be important to Alpha Flight up until the modern era. There's a fair bit of introduction and description of new characters, and we'll do our best, but know you are going to see all of them again later.
And fair warning, this is a heavy episode, and it stays true to most of Alpha Flight's core themes. There will be team-ups, there will be failure, there will be death. So maybe save this episode for when you can mix up your cocktail of choice or procure your preferred pale ale, because you're gonna need it.
Without further ado, Alpha Flight number 11, titled Setup, cover date June 1984. Writing and art by John Byrne, colored by Andy Yankus, lettered by Michael Higgins, edited by Denny O'Neil and Linda Grant. The same credits will apply for number 12 when we get there.
On the cover, we see the words, "To save the life of the woman he loves, he must face them." And it's a full-page shot of Guardian from the back, facing off against a silhouetted team, at the center of which is a man in the wheelchair.
I wonder how many kids bought this thinking it would be the X-Men. There is obviously history between the X-Men and Alpha Flight. They've squared off before. Things were left on pretty good terms, but that can always change. And also, wheelchairs aren't hugely common in superhero comics, so it does more than somewhat suggest probably the most famous character in all of comics who, is in a wheelchair.
And if you look closely at the silhouettes of the bad guys on the page, none of them match up to the X-Men, although there is a big one that would be like, I guess, the Colossus, although Colossus isn't drawn like that in this era. And if you look, you can see clearly it's not the X-Men. You can even see hair on the wheelchair guy's head. And so anyone who really looked at all would be able to tell. But I think it was just one of those wink and nod things about, hey, are they fighting the X-Men again? Oh, they're not. Oh, interesting. But it's a good cover. I liked it. The book opens on February 29th because 1984 had a leap year and because this book would have been on the stands for March of that year.
And because John Byrne is that kind of particular person, as indicated by the next bit.
Well, in the city of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and if you think that sounds made up, I'm here to tell you that I checked and it is real and it is fabulous. It is the fourth largest city in Saskatchewan with a 2023 population of over 33,000 people.
I wonder what the population was in 1984. That would actually be kind of interesting to figure out.
I think I tried to look it up and got bored.
Why must you just step on me? We see the beautiful and stylish Delphine Courtney paying another enigmatic visit. I guess it's enigmatic because we don't know why she's visiting. I don't think she's like floating in like a ghost and like, ooh. Anyway, this time to a Mr. Box in his cluttered apartment, and that's spelled Bochs. Recall that she is a white woman of average height with her blue-toned hair and an aggressive asymmetrical bob haircut, big furry crop top coat, and tight pants. Beautiful and stylish are used here to denote what she's meant to convey, not necessarily what we think is beautiful and stylish. Remember, this is 1984.
A listener pointed out to me on Fark.com that Byrne is unusual in his attention to women's fashion, and I think that's a great point. The subtleties of Aurora versus Jean Marie are played out in small but important changes, not just in her clothes, but in how they lay on her. And clothing laying on top of human bodies is something that, I mean, many comic book readers have gone their whole reading lives without ever seeing a woman wear anything that wasn't skin tight or a jacket or a belt over skin tight. And you made a point about the stylish and fashionable, and we're going to describe a room like that later, and it's dated, but it looks good for what it is, and he shows instead of tells us about the people who live and work in those spaces. Like, this is like high frame rate daytime TV level stylish, you know what I mean?
And this is a thing Byrne does really well, both in the art and even the specificity of place and like the specifics of the date, like, indicating it's February 29th. His art and that attention to detail really just tells the story in a way that it almost precludes too much expository dialogue or over narration bubbles running all over the place. He just kind of is able to situate you something akin to a real space so that you fill in a lot of the gaps and you know who these people are, you know what they're moving through, and that does a lot of really good work for the rest of the comic. It's impressive, and it's actually something that I don't know. I don't think a lot of comic writers or artists always nail, but here he is doing it, and he's doing it quite well.
I won't say that it's underwritten, but I appreciate that it's not overwritten. And you and I are going to pick up this conversation again when we get through Alpha Flight Volume 2, because Siegel there uses so many narration boxes and does these framing devices, and it's what he does. And that's okay, but boy, does it feel different.
I think your point about not underwriting or overwriting is a really solid one. I think that's really what we're getting at. He's walking a very tight line, making sure that the reader has everything, but not distracting them at the same time. And I do think some of the earlier issues and even some of the prehistory, there was a good deal more narration. I mean, even thinking of the backup stories, there's a lot of narrative
Elvis
boxes.
Costello on the radio.
Right.
Yeah.
All those things to really kind of set it up and situate it more, but kind of backfill information. And we're now hitting in these issues. We know who these characters are. We know what they do. We kind of have a sense of dynamics. And so now he's just sort of reinforcing that and not having to say, and this is so-and-so, and this is so-and-so. And it's almost hitting a maturity point, which is appropriate for
Yeah.
these issues.
And I remember you commenting as we started that you were surprised at how many words were on the page.
Yeah.
As you started reading some of these earliest 80s ones. And if you think back to Alpha Flight number 1, there is a good deal of narration over that, but it's not overwrought narration. And I think that when you compare it to Siegel later on, it's going to really hold up all the better. Swinging back to the scene on the page, Miss Courtney's hair will later be expressly called blue, so I don't think this is an inking convention to convey black hair like Superman or Wolverine or Colossus or something. I think she's the original blue-haired dream girl boss bitch.
Sworn enemy to the pink-haired manic pixie dream girl, the boss bitch will be sidelined from the late 90s through the early 2010s, but is making something of a renaissance of late. Truly a battle that will never end.
Recall that we last saw Delphine Courtney in issue number 7 making contact with Smart Alec of Gamma Flight regarding an undefined project. Mr. Box is a pudgy white man with red hair, whose legs stop where his knees would be expected to begin. He sits on a powered wheelchair and says, "Thanks for your offer, Miss Courtney. I'll be in touch." She replies, "Don't take too long, Mr. Box. The fires of vengeance dwindle with too much contemplation." So, Miss Courtney is recruiting the lost members of Beta and Gamma flights for revenge against Department H. Box, however, isn't on board with this plan and tries to warn Department H, but can't get through to his liaison, Gary Cody, so he pulls back a curtain in his kitchen while thinking, "Then it looks as if it's going to be up to us, old friend," and reveals a big robot-looking thing in the shadows.
Basically, it looks like a 9-foot tall, boxy blue power lifter robot with an overly tight golden waist cinture on, or like a weightlifter support belt, but WWE size.
Fake Diesel and fake Razor would have worked if given enough time to establish themselves and actually had a direction.
Well, if that's not the story of Alpha Flight, I don't know what is. Or the WWE under Vince. So, random connection, but pro wrestling has really deep roots in Canada. And since you brought this up, I'm just going to riff for a second. We touched on the Calgary Stampede in, I think it was our episode 2 of the prehistory. But Stampede Wrestling was a major mid-level wrestling promotion founded by Stu Hart, the patriarch of the Hart family, Owen Hart, Bret Hart, all their associated folks. A lot of Canadian wrestlers came through there. Edge, for instance, who's still around. I think it's interesting that we brought in this WWE connection and this wrestling connection in general, because Canada and Canadian wrestlers writ large have done a lot to popularize and be the support system for pro wrestling in North America. And I don't know why I know this. I don't watch
My
wrestling.
dude, I have known you for 25 years, and I have never known you to talk about wrestling before. And I am honestly, I'm not even mad. Frankly, I'm impressed.
I don't know why. I really don't know why I know these things. I wasn't an Attitude Era kid. We had a friend in college who was all about the wrestling and would like go and watch all the pay-per-views. And I think I did that with him once, but like it was just because I wanted to go to the bar. Like I don't know. My brain's weird.
You and I are both familiar with the feeling of saying to someone, look, I don't know why I know this, but I promise you, this is the case.
Yeah.
So Bach seems to be playing a double agent here, trying to help keep Courtney at bay and trying to alert Department H. He seems like a loyal guy. You know, we'll get to know him much more later on beyond this episode. But for now, I have a good impression about Roger. He seems like a good-hearted guy. So back in issue number 6, Team Leader Guardian, a.k.a. James McDonald Hudson, a.k.a. JMH, received a mystery letter from the Roxxon Corporation in America, and in issue 10 we learned that it was a job offer as an executive scientist in New York City. Well, today is moving day, and we are treated to 3 lovely and touching pages of Heather Hudson saying goodbye to her apartment at the unnecessarily specific address of 138A Laurier Drive in Ottawa. Having lived there since marrying JMH 10 years ago, it's where all of her adult life and arguably some
Too much.
of her childhood has been spent, and now she's flying off to meet her man in America and start a new life as Captain America's neighbors.
There are quotes floating by in the captions. Some are dialogue we have read in the apartment. Some are things we can only imagine were said, but help fill out the heart-tugging feeling of giving up everything you've ever known, even your country, to follow the only man you've ever kissed.
I have never lived anywhere for 10 years in a row, so I can both appreciate this and roll my eyes at it as well.
I have mostly spent long periods of time in homes, so I get this. It does feel a touch ham-handed, but emotions, they fuck with you. Meanwhile, in New York, in a conference room in the World Trade Center.
Yeah, that was a real surprise to me, Tom. What did you feel about turning the page and seeing the World Trade Center?
Surprising, rather unexpected.
I mean, what's more Canadian than fighting in the World Trade Center, right?
Oh, we are not doing, man, I don't know if we keep that one in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I derail you, Tom? All right, I'll just pick back up the script. So I hadn't remembered this taking place there, but here we are. So it's amazing what you find out when you read things after 40 years, huh? So Mr. Box is in a conference room with 4 other people who we come to find out are all from Beta or Gamma Flight. As they snap and fight with each other, Miss Delphine Courtney thinks the influencer is working perfectly, heightening their petty jealousies and phobias, priming them. I want to make a point of this influencer, listeners, because this is just about the only reference we get to it. So remember this, more later.
She introduces them to each other and us through a 5-panel construction that directly mirrors the way we were first introduced to Alpha Flight all those years ago. From the narration, world-class engineer and mechanic without equal, Box, spelled B-O-X. So the man is Box, B-O-C-H-S, the robot is Box, B-O-X. Works a lot better on the page and probably won't matter, but it's, a neat little detail. So for you, dear listeners, just remember that the man is not the robot and vice versa. I mean, kind of a Frankenstein versus Frankenstein's monster if you want to be a pedant.
No, I'm going to be a pedant. No. Next up is our indestructible giantess. No known force can harm her, Diamond Lil. She is a tall white woman with very long light brown hair with very 80s flat bangs and a scowl on her attractive face.
The living temporal anomaly, a man who can summon his own future, flashback. He's a white guy with Doctor Strange or Reed Richards' gray temple streaks and is wearing an orange blouse, which he is wearing very, very well.
The man with the computer brain, intellect unsurpassed, Smart Alec, the sour-faced chess player we met along with Delphine Courtney. He has a sad comb-over, and it does not inspire faith in his supposed intellect.
And last but by no means least, our resident killing machine, Wildchild.
Whoo boy. Wildchild is a lean white man with very, very long blonde hair. A point is made that he's supposed to be ugly, like a dog-faced boy, but instead of an animal's face, they just like removed his nose and made his teeth sharp, and he looks more like a snake. Like he looks like Voldemort in a bad wig.
And that wig is loosely braided down his back to his butt. For a killing machine to keep and maintain hair that long and to take the time to braid it, like someone else had to braid it, right? And especially the blood, I mean, it'd be pretty nasty.
Like, is he paying a hairdresser to like clean his hair and get it done up after every battle? Is he threatening a hairdresser? Does he have a hairdresser tied up in the closet that he brings out and like makes her do this? Honestly, I find the detail of Wildchild's braid to be the most interesting thing we learn about any of these characters. And he doesn't appear without it. Like off the top of my head, he'll be with us, gosh, I think through the present day. But for a very long time, yeah, Wildchild is committed to hashtag hair life.
2 quick points. One, I like to think that the salon bills are part of why Department H got shut down. It just, alongside the maple syrup, it was just getting out of control and, budget constraints. But the second point is, I think I'm going to have to start cutting in the lead into Hey Jealousy whenever you talk about a character's hair. I mean, is this why you like Walt so much? The luxurious locks when he turns into Sasquatch?
Oh, can you imagine how long he has to like comb himself? And if he has to be like Sasquatch out in the woods for like days at a time or something.
Oh my God,
that
the burrs. The twigs.
Now, when he turns back into Walt, does it all just fall out? Like, is he surrounded by burrs and twigs and leaves and bits that he couldn't wipe up? You know what? This got a little, I'm uncomfortable. Moving back to Wildchild. He seems to have claws on his fingers like Sabretooth, and I take it back. He doesn't look like Voldemort in a wig. He looks like he's Iggy Pop playing Sabretooth in a low-budget movie like The Crow 2 City of Angels.
Hey, watch it.
Iggy Pop Sabretooth is now and forever how I will think of Wildchild. Sorry, Kyle. Them's the ropes. Yeah, Wildchild's name is Kyle. It's not exactly a killer's name, Bella.
Miss Courtney introduces the man with a plan, her boss that put the whole project in motion, Mr. Jerome Jackson. Remember him? You probably don't, which is fine because I almost didn't, and I do this podcast. But we made sure to say his name back in episode number 5 for this reason. He was JMH's boss when JMH developed the suit for a joint American-Canadian company that wanted it for military use instead of the purely benevolent and harmless original purpose, mining.
He is a white-haired man in a wheelchair. He looks like if Christopher Reeve and Donald Sutherland had a baby, and that baby was old and in a wheelchair and has Christopher Reeve's amazing hair but solid silver. When JMH stole the helmet, he ruined the program and ran to Ottawa, and all of that blame fell on Jackson, and he is pissed.
He has gathered together others who have been wronged by JMH, so, quote, that we may crush his dreams as he's crushed ours. I propose nothing less than the utter destruction of Alpha Flight.
One, I love that you made it sound like he was a Canadian speaking with a fake American accent. That was chef's kiss, bro.
I was going for a Canadian Nixon.
Nailed it. No notes.
Let's also be clear. If Nixon hadn't been the politician he was, he absolutely would have been an oil executive, and he wouldn't have even needed the impetus of someone ruining a program to just set out to destroy that person's life. He would have done it because it was breakfast time and he was feeling a little low on the vodka. You see that Canadian
flag wearing motherfucker? We're gonna fuck up his life.
Tell me the lie.
Nixon was loosely written into the Marvel comic books with Captain America. I am not an expert, but if I recall, in that story, fake Nixon killed himself when Captain America confronted him with how he was wounding the nation, and that's what kicked off Cap resigning and becoming Nomad. There's a lot of Captain America out there, and the 70s and 80s are pretty rough.
Interesting.
So are the 60s and the 90s and the teens.
One could argue it's never been great being Captain America.
There's less than 100 great Captain America issues, and there's a lot more than that exist. But this is not a Captain America podcast.
Well, before we move on, I think we should clarify that's not to say there are like less than 100 quality Captain America issues. There are less than 100 issues where it's good to be Captain America, I think.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you know what? I think you make a very excellent point there, Tom. So Jackson has gathered together his band of ne'er-do-wells in order for them to get together and kill their old boss. And it all comes back to the workplace in Alpha Flight. I've had bosses screw me over before, but I never considered rounding up others so that we could go murder them. I mean, thought about it, no comment. But did it? Definitely. No, never. Nuh-uh. Statute of limitations isn't run out yet, so I have never thought about it.
Just gonna say, it takes a little more to be a champion. Almost all of our pieces are in place. The last is Guardian, who is flying in costume to the airport to pick up Heather. We refer to his suit as costume quite a bit. I think that might be like underplaying it. It is what makes him Guardian.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, we just blithely referred to the suit, and just to remind listeners, this is the powered super suit that takes advantage of local EM field disruptions to make him have superpowers. He developed it in college. It runs off a cybernetic helmet. And beyond that, we know that his force field can keep him safe from a lot of things, but we don't know anything else about the suit itself underneath there.
Guardian is late getting to the airport because he was required to be in a surprise meeting at his new work at Roxxon. As he tries to find Heather at the Air Canada desk, one of the employees says he saw her leave with a, quote, very striking, end quote, woman who dropped the business card in a way that seemed very obvious. JMH takes the card and sees it's a Roxxon business card with the name Jerome Jackson on it. Associate Vice President for what it's worth. I mean, that's not nothing and most surely way above JMH's self. However, is Associate Vice President really high enough to have the juice to pull together a death squad aimed at one man? Maybe in Elon's America.
Can you imagine what the death squad that Elon puts together would look like?
Incredibly ineffectual and very, very, very whiny. They will complain about how you tried to dodge their bullets.
This is bullshit.
Just a lot of whinging. Oh, I missed because someone messed with my sight, not because I'm a bad shot. My platform crashed because there was a massive DDoS attack on it, not because I don't know how to maintain the infrastructure of the damn place. Whatever. I was just going to comment that, like, the Elon's America line I threw out there, it's fine. It's in any version of America. Absolutely. An associate vice president of anything could 100% pull together a death squad. It just is what it is.
Realizing the long con he's fallen for, from the job offer to the sudden meeting, JMH races back to the World Trade Center and the tension ratchets up. What I'm wondering is, what was that meeting like? Because again, Alpha Flight is a workplace comedy. When the associate vice president tells you in middle management, hey, I need you to have this guy stuck in a meeting between 3 and 5 p.m. today. And you're like, oh, okay, well, like, do you give him a budget presentation? Like, what do you do?
No, it's an HR meeting.
James, we're worried about the tightness of your pants.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, it's like, we don't know how they handle things up in Canada. But, and then, they just go from there. And 45 minutes later, he's not sure that anything was actually ever spoken, but he's damn sure that he hates himself more than he did before.
Maybe it was like a Welcome to America transition course, and they like served him popcorn and hot dogs or something and explained how football works. I don't know. I'm just envisioning JMH in the meeting thinking, this meeting could have been an email, even in 1984.
I'm literally inventing email in this meeting so that I never go through this again. And like the welcome basket includes like a bottle of maple syrup, and he's like, oh man, you have no idea how necessary this is.
Just twist it off and just start slamming it back.
No, he doesn't slam it.
Oh, thank Christ! This meeting is intolerable.
No, he doesn't. No. He doesn't even slam it back. He like opens it up, and then he quietly underneath the table like connects it to the suit that's underneath his.
Upon melting his way through the window, have we seen him do this before? I don't know that we have.
I mean, again, ill-defined abilities. Like, how does his suit work inside of a building, distorting EM fields? Is he completely like frying all the circuitry in the building every time he uses it?
Has an EM field melt glass, like industrial grade construction glass, like that? Like, okay, you know what? Comics, everybody. But you know, the point about him affecting electronics around him, that would be really cool, actually.
Oh yeah.
Like a really neat touch if you're going to ever bring this onto the screen. I think that would be super neat.
Yeah, they'll totally change the suit's powers if they bring him on the screen.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, no point in suffering twice. So he melts his way into Jackson's office, and JMH is lured by a video of Jackson down a private elevator.
But crucially, not before JMH sends out the call to Alpha Flight that one of them, in this case him, is in serious trouble. It's good to have friends. But it's not Alpha Flight who greets him as the elevator opens. JMH is faced by a group of ne'er-do-wells, now in costume and officially dubbed Omega Flight. That's a team up. Take a drink. But it's an evil team up. So use Rumpelminz or Goldschlager or something. And just to say, that was Chris's suggestion. Like, that's what he wrote in the script. I implore you to run like hell from both those liquors and anyone who offers them to you.
Oh, the same as you should do from Omega Flight, right?
Pretty much. Smart Alec almost definitely drinks Rumpelminz. Like, look at him.
Oh God.
He dips his hot dogs into them.
Stop. It's gross enough already. And that ends up issue 11 and brings us to definitive issue number 12. It is probably the most well-known issue of all of Alpha Flight. The cover will go on to be referenced a few times throughout subsequent volumes as the classic Alpha Flight dramatic cover. It's even used by writer Steve Siegel in Alpha Flight Volume 2, number 12, when a team member... Well, we'll get to that. But his whole arc in Volume 2, 1 through 12, is intentionally structured to mimic the feel of this original arc, including the look of the cover at the end of number 12. And it was successful for a certain definition of success. Having just reread the whole 20 issues, I think I liked it a whole lot more than others did. It isn't perfect, but I look forward to talking about it.
The cover is the standard logo and corner box stuff, but it is dominated by 7 headshots of our team members, all in a round crosshairs view, with the title underneath, "And One Shall Surely Die," which does do a good job of creating some suspense and sets the tone for the issue.
It's right there on the cover, Chekhov's gun. If you say that somebody's going to die by the end of the issue, somebody's got to die. Other than the headshots, the cover is a kind of bright pink color. And the headshots themselves are tones of pink and orange. It's really cool look, and props to Andy Yankus for a bold color choice that paid off.
Issue 12 opens with an increasingly agitated Heather Hudson in a stylish, for 1984, room with Miss Delphine Courtney, where another pre-recorded video from Jerome Jackson villain-splains to her what's going on. While we know what JMH has been up to since he and Jackson parted ways at the Amcan Petrochemical Company all those years ago, those years have not been as nice to Jackson as they were to JMH. After JMH ruined the program Jackson oversaw, he, Jackson, was summoned to the head office in Houston to be fired with prejudice. The company even canceled his return ticket home. He arrived home just in time to find his wife and kids leaving him. Quote, "A disadvantage, I suppose, to having married the boss's daughter," end quote. Jackson found that his professional ties were all burned by Amcan, and he was left unemployable and living in a flop house where he decided to kill himself by hanging. His run of luck continued as the landlady found him and saved his life, but he was left paralyzed from the waist down.
Wow. Just take a moment there. That escalated quickly. But I guess that's the kind of life-ruining leverage a company like Roxxon needs to get people to make new technology to rape the land and kill their fellow man. So I guess the answer here is I don't know what I expected. for a businessman who fails at the level that Jackson did.
We truly live in the best of all possible worlds, bruv. And on that note, we keep mentioning the year. And kind of like your Chekhov's gun reference before, we'd be a little bit remiss not to bring up the whole 1984 Orwellian elephant in the room here. We got a lot going on here. I don't know. It just
We are literate guys, and we are aware of the connection, and we're looking for the perfect way to talk about it because we're still kind of early 1984 in published time. We've got a few episodes left. We'll get there. Don't worry, Tom.
I didn't want that one to fly by, and I didn't want to hear about it from my sister that we didn't mention it, and I didn't want you to hear about it from either of your sisters that we didn't mention it.
They do tell me when I get things wrong.
Oh, or what we miss. It's just, come on, man. Like,
type it up in a comment on the blog at the whynotpod.com blog.
We'd love to see it there.
Yeah. We don't want to hear it from them on our phone calls. We just want to hear from the strangers from the internet.
Absolutely.
Cringe alert. In the video, Byrne has Jackson say, "Yes, dear Heather, I am now forever bound to this wheelchair, a cripple, but not quite a helpless cripple." Ew. It's a reminder of how far we've come in 40 years and how we discuss disability. But wow. Box, being in a wheelchair and, as Byrne and Mantlo put it, a cripple, is often used as a source of Box being down on himself or reminding himself that he is less than other men, and it's ugly to see. And maybe we'll get a disability rights activist to come talk to us about this soon.
And say what? This fucking sucks? Yeah, man, we know.
No, hopefully he'd be able to talk to us about better ways to have this discussion and maybe help reframe it and take it back.
A man can dream.
Jackson's fortunes turn around when he sees media reports about Guardian and catches an obscure reference to Guardian's connection to the government. On a hunch, he calls the Defense Ministry and asks for James Hudson, and he is put right through.
Those Canadian government agencies are really top-notch. You've got JMH as the head of their superhero / super soldier development program, and someone cold calls for him and you just put him through. It's like, call in line 3, and it's like his freaking arch nemesis. But Box tries to call Gary Cody and can't like even get connected. I mean, like, what?
Well, they learned from this because this would have happened a while ago. So they learned from this particular. He probably got, so Jackson, hears JMH's voice and hangs up, and then JMH calls the secretary. It was like, "Hey, I just got a weird call. Maybe don't tell people I work here. Just next time."
I think you're giving JMH entirely too much credit. We've already established
That's true.
We've already established he is not the best administrator. I also think that the thing that the Canadian government, in this version, the Canadian government is best at is just making more government and not necessarily structuring it well or executing it well. It just replicates. It just expands ever outward like a blob or the Borg.
Say what you will about Reed Richards, but the man seems to have his bureaucracy down pretty well. Things run, the mistakes are not in basic bureaucratic planning.
I don't know. He seems kind of stretched thin to me.
This is the worst thing you've ever done, Tom. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jackson rolls into Roxxon headquarters with a plan for Roxxon to control a unique energy source.
Rolls? Really? Who's the ablest now?
It was an accident. He did roll, like, in my defense. I was trying to convey his confidence as he like strides into the president's office.
Strides? Dig up, Chris.
Oh, God damn it so much.
Roxxon chairman August D'Angelo, which is a great name for a chairman, gives Jackson an associate VP title in the special development department and gives him Miss Delphine Courtney as his assistant. I'm not sure how knowing JMH's Guardian will control unique energy source. I mean, I don't think it's the power source itself. I think they want the suit for mining more oil. I mean, why would Roxxon care so much they would fund Jackson? So just how much maple syrup is condensed into the suit's power supply?
JMH flies around with Canada's strategic maple syrup reserve, just on him in concentrated form. Yeah, he is Canada.
If you want to keep it safe, put it with Captain Canada. What do you want? It makes sense to me. I mean, it makes as much sense as just about any other choice they've made. Let's be clear.
It's the safest place to put it. What's going to happen? Is he going to get captured and put into a room and then beaten to death while wearing the suit? I mean, come on. It's not like somebody's going to do that. And fast forward 100 issues or so, and Alpha Flight will get a new member named Windshear, who prior to his Alpha stint was working as a superpowered problem solver for Roxxon. So maybe they're doing some Wagner Group, like private army building stuff. I think that's what they're actually after JMH's suit for. They're not after the power supply.
I like the idea that you think that Roxxon is building a private army, as if that is not.
We've met their private army. It's apparently Windshear, who sucks, by the way.
But it's a faceless, vaguely evil mining company. Of course they have a private army. Why wouldn't they have a private army? I don't know, man. I'm just saying I'm surprised by this naivete from you.
I'm sure that Roxxon has like dudes who pull up to places really fast in a convoy of matching American-made SUVs like you see in TV shows. Hell, you see that in Logan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Absolutely, you do.
I think 30% of the TV show Alias's screen time was matched convoys of things screeching up and dudes getting out.
It's a hell of a way to save on production budget. Absolutely.
And you get the car companies to underwrite it by paying to have their cars featured. So Miss Courtney here is shown in the office. I mean, it's not the office. It looks like it's some type of big open like research room or maybe a gym or something, but she's wearing workout clothes. She's wearing sexy 80s workout clothes. Tom, why is the aggressively sexualized Miss Delphine Courtney dressed like this at work?
Because it's 1984. Because this is a corporation like this, because this is the depiction of a corporation in 1984. You tell me, do you expect her to be dressed in anything else when she meets her new boss? Who do you think August D'Angelo is? Like, what do you think this corporation is? Do me a little favor here. Think of a New York businessman in the 80s and tell me who comes to mind. Yeah, it's Trump, right? And when you think of that, do you think that he would have anything other than folks in like workout clothes available for the associate vice presidents? Yeah, man. Trump is the archetype of the Alpha Flight villain.
I take it back. This is the worst thing you've ever done, Tom.
Glad to hear it. We'll explain why she's in workout clothes in a couple more pages. I mean, I think we just did, but at this point, Heather has had enough of Jackson and Courtney and starts mouthing off. A scuffle ensues, and she slaps Courtney's face and apparently tears the skin off of it. We see it from behind, so we don't see the result. We just see the back of Courtney's head, Heather's shocked expression, and a bunch of cloth-looking skin. It's frankly really surprising and really gross.
Like, it looks like she straight up, bitch, you what? And just shredded her face off. It's great. But all is not lost for our brave team leader and his lady fair. Remember, Guardian had sent out the call to Alpha Flight before he stupidly got in the elevator. And the team hasn't all seen each other since they left the Master's destroyed base way back in issue number 4. And they went off on their solo adventures. So they'll have lots to talk about when they see each other, Tom.
We next see Alpha Flight OG members Shaman and Snowbird standing in the open wilderness, sharing premonitions of death and wondering which of their teammates will arrive first. So basically a Tuesday for those two.
Yeah, I was thinking, when you describe it that way, there might be a reason why people aren't hanging out with you, Shaman and Snowbird. I mean, you guys are kind of wet blankets there when it's nothing but premonitions of death and wondering which of their teammates will die first.
It could also, be a good reason not to join Alpha Flight. Like, premonitions of death seem to be kind of the thing.
Probably benefits Shaman in his private practice, where when Mrs. Jones comes in and he's like, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to need you to pay up front.
That's really messed up. Oh.
Our friend, secret agent, superhero linebacker Dr. Walter Langowski came home to Vancouver from his fight with the Super Skrull to find an uninvited fellow Alphan, the speedster/split personality Aurora, was now living with him. Walt is cranky. He's been waiting for more than 40 minutes for her to arrive so they can answer the call. She's been sunbathing in Saint-Tropez and took her time getting home. She even tries to get Walt to hold off on answering the call so they can have some adult time, which is not very responsible of Aurora.
Which is kind of her whole thing. She's not necessarily responsible, or at the very least, she has her own priorities. I mean, that's frankly part of what it seems the Aurora personality is a reaction against Jean-Marie's like submissiveness. This is her asserting what she wants over maybe what others are asking for. And she likes men. I think that's play enough. I think that gets across everything we've been implying here.
Well, while there wasn't any sex, We all thought about it, so everybody think about your next drink and get ready, cowboy, because they're coming.
Walt turns her down and tells her to get dressed, and she literally does it between panels. One panel she's in a bathing suit, the next in her superhero costume. One cool thing here is that Walt is wearing an ugly and bulky asbestos suit intended to let him be carried by Aurora at high speed without being incinerated by the friction. It's always neat when those sorts of practical limitations are presented with superpowers.
So, of course, this suit and the concept are literally never brought up again. And another point on this, Aurora is carrying, like, Walt. He's hanging onto her shoulder. Walt has his failings, but he is a burly, strong man who is totally okay with his girlfriend carrying him on her back into battle. And in 1984, that's like practically being woke.
We next get a glimpse of our hirsute dwarf and a unitard, Eugene Judd, aka Puck, in his natural environment. A flop house in Toronto with a Craigslist free section aesthetic. I think he got the room cheap because the previous tenant tried to hang himself. I'm not saying it was Jackson. I'm just saying.
That made it worse, Tom.
Oh, I know. Ever since you challenged me by saying that's the worst thing you've said, it's just, we're going downhill from here, baby. Judd is meditating when he gets the call, and the thought of action pleases him. He thinks,
Puck hasn't had much to do since the affair of the brass bishop. No, the brass bishop isn't something we missed, and in fact, there's even an editor's note saying, don't worry, you haven't missed it. This is just a plot hook that helps world build at this point, and that'll come up in volume 2. The brass bishop is a cool villain. I kind of liked him, but we'll just come back to that.
We're not even going to address the third person Puck usage here.
Maybe he's having his own Aurora thing here, where Puck and Judd are turning into different people. I don't know.
It kind of more reminded me of Bruce Wayne and Batman Beyond.
And Puck doesn't seem to be like his superhero name that he picked for Beta Flight, because when we meet some of his friends later from before the flight, they all call him Puck. Like, that's what he was going by. So this is just like his nom de guerre, no matter what he's doing. Having figured out some better logistics than the last time Alpha had to get together quickly, which, if you recall, Puck didn't get there because the army wouldn't let him get on a plane. So Puck is waiting on the roof for someone to pick him up because they arranged a ride for the little guy. He's surprised when Northstar shows up without Aurora with him. Recall that when we last left our speedster twins after their Deadly Earnest adventure, they had broken up. Still don't know how siblings break up, but apparently comic book siblings can break up.
And on your point of abandoning a neat idea almost as soon as it's introduced, there is no asbestos suit for Puck, which makes me wonder if his hair serves the same function, but I that's as far as I want to. Nope. That's as far as I want to go with that one. Newfoundland native Marina Smallwood has been with Namor the Submariner in Atlantis since issue number 4, and as per usual, when the call comes through, she's not wearing her brooch and does not know that she's required. She also, even while wearing the brooch, may not have noticed it as she's rather busy making Sue Storm jealous with Namor.
Bob Barker to remind you to get your superheroes chipped. Goodbye, everybody. So they all meet up for the first time since the very beginning of issue number 2, and since we've been going 10 issues since then, take a drink for a team up. And of course, misunderstandings and fisticuffs ensue. This fight goes on for like 6 pages, and I feel like it could have been like 1 page of infighting in a pinch. It feels like it goes on a little long, but does help establish some character moments and stitch together everything that's been going on as everyone brings their experiences since issue 4 together and quickly figures it out.
And since we've got 6 pages of fighting, we may as well dig in a touch, because there are some genuinely amusing and disturbing moments.
Northstar begins by desperately pleading with Aurora to not leave him alone, presumably in French. So it was just the two of them showing up and being like the dramatic, pissy French kids and just squabbling with each other while everybody else is looking at them.
Walt decides to step in to protect his lady, which, of course, causes things to get out of hand. He changes it into Sasquatch, and this is the disturbing moment. There's a 3-panel sequence showing him transition from Walt into Sasquatch, actually more of a 4-panel sequence. But the second panel has him a little too much Walt and not enough Sasquatch. There's a real uncanny valley, like it looks human, but clearly isn't thing going on there that I don't like it. It's not good, guys. It's not great.
So while trying to beat Northstar to death, Sasquatch does call him Froggy, which is that loaded in Canada? I know that we call, Frenchmen from France frogs, but does that apply to French Canadian? Is this John Byrne fundamentally misunderstanding that Quebec is not France?
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Puck jumps in to try to distract him while Snowbird gives Northstar a taste of the human-sized owl treatment.
When Northstar sees a human-sized owl flying at him, he exclaims in French, "Sapristi," which you informed me.
Apparently, Marvel Comics decided that everyone with French in their background would say this when they get surprised. I think the literal translation from French is surprise, but that's not how. Like in English, it would probably be translated to like what the, just something that you say when you're startled and it flows out. But I've come to learn from again posters at Fark.com that sapristi is more of a French saying of that, and that the French Canadians would say something more akin to tabernacle, which I am not able to do French, but that tabernacle is what they would actually be saying there as a surprise. Get out of here. What the, just something that you say as a response. Gambit says this, I recall, in the one where he takes Rogue on a date and his motorcycle blows up. That panel, he says, sapristi. I don't remember my bank login password, but I remember that panel, Tom.
I was going to say, like, that's a very specific example because I can think of any number of times that he said "Sapristi," but
because it stands out. It's weird. It's like how Nightcrawler exclaims German word unglaublich.
But I like Tabernacle better because it really, I think, gets more across the idea of fuck owl. It's like this gigantic owl is flying at its
goddamn
face.
Owl.
It's a big goddamn owl flying at the moneymaker. Like that's not great. It's a classic Alpha Flight family brawl that ends when Dad, Michael fucking two young men, stops it by trapping Sasquatch in mystical vines long enough for Aurora to calm him down and bring him to his senses. At which point, Shaman teleports everyone to get some ice cream.
And by ice cream, we mean he teleports them directly into the end of issue number 11 and the fight between Guardian and Omega Fight.
I've had worse ice cream.
I once saw a grown man order bubblegum ice cream. It was bright blue and it had like chiclets like frozen into it. And so this bright blue bubblegum flavored ice cream with hard bubblegum in it had hot fudge and Butterfinger chips put on top of it. And I will definitively say I have at least seen worse ice cream than teleporting into this fight at the end of issue number 11.
That is the worst thing that has been said this entire episode. That's a war crime.
JMH heroically greets them. Alpha Flight! Glad to see you finally made it, people. Pick a partner and let's finish this fight. And he does the thing where he says the team's name. When he says it, it appears in the logo from the front of the book. I'm a sucker for stupid stuff like that. It just felt like any other comic book. And I mean that in a good way. Like it felt like the team coming into its own and it's being treated on par with other teams. They get the logo speech.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that might be the last true high point of this issue.
We next see Omega Flight in all of their glory. Diamond Lil is wearing a head-to-toe green and yellow Harlequin pattern costume, and it includes a little yellow mask for no reason because her hair is like totally flowing and she's like 6 feet tall. So if she's trying to hide, it's a really bad job.
Wildchild has let down his lovely braid, and it might not be that bad, but he wears a bland purple-black leotard with bare hands and feet.
Oh, it's so boring. Sorry to pick on your sartorial choices there, Kyle, but Iggy Pop should have really known how to pick something better than that.
I really love how you say the character's actual name with such dismissiveness. Like, did Kyle wrong you at some point, man? Do you have something against Kyle's?
Kyle's tend... You know what? I'm not going to talk about Kyle.
Let's not do that.
Smart Alec has some hideous goldenrod in fuchsia suit. It's got a big helmet on top of his head, and it's got like a Cyclops style slit visor. We come to find out that there's like computers in there, and it gives him like Geordie LaForge vision, and it's supposed to help augment his thoughts, but it's not. He doesn't look cool.
It does not augment his costume or his fashion choices.
Yeah, he still has pencil limbs and looks like he's made out of pipe cleaners, though.
I mean, that's what you get when you exist on a diet of hot dogs, coffee, and
Rumplemans.
Yeah. The box robot looks exactly like it did before, but it's much bigger here, which Just scaling is a little bit different. This box absolutely could not have fit in Roger's kitchen like we saw earlier, but that is what it is.
Yeah, big beefy robot thing. Our friend Flashback from earlier has doffed his lovely orange blouse and now wears a white bodysuit with like a triangular black surplus thing on the shoulders and waist. It's pointing at the shoulders and points down to the waist with a connected black headpiece. The orange blouse, I think, was a better look. His power is to summon himself from the future, which is, I guess, cool. But instead of getting stock and racing tips from his future selves, he uses them to try to fistfight Guardian, trying to swarm him with a bunch of future selves down from the air so that they can continue to ground and pound once he's on the ground. And the future selves wear a palette swapped costume where they have a black bodysuit with a white pointy thing on top.
How does that work?
Which part? The like temporal displacement or the way that his future selves know to wear the white one instead of the black one that day?
Any of it?
Yeah, I agree that Flashback doesn't make a lot of sense. While Guardian deals with Flashback, the fisticuffs ensue. Wildchild threatens Aurora, only to be picked up by Northstar, who flies at top speed and hurls Wildchild into a wall.
It would have been quicker to punch him in the back of the head. Snowbird is suddenly stricken and collapses. Diamond Lil takes this opportunity to pluck one of her waist-length hairs and wrap it around Snowbird's throat.
So Lil's deal is that she's indestructible, like Luke Cage, but a tall white woman. Apparently that ability extends to her hair, which can't be broken either. And I guess that's why it's so long. Nobody has adamantium scissors to cut it. It would have been cool if she ever fought Wolverine and he slashed at her and ended up with a haircut. And then once they made up at the end of the issue, he had to go back and even up the haircut for her.
Again, the salon bills for beta and gamma flights absolutely contributed to the dissolution of Department H. Before Lil has the opportunity to cut off Snowbird's head, Shaman jumps in and saves the day. Wraps Lil up in some vines and does a little bit of psychic attack on her as well. Either way, it...
Deus Ex Shaman, yeah.
Yeah, Deus Ex Shaman. Shaman realizes that Narya's sudden weakness stems from how he bound her to the land when she was born. Instead of binding her to the earth, he bound her to the land that makes up Canada. So when she leaves, she loses her vitality.
Okay, except we're in New York City in North America. Being bound to Canada seems really unnecessarily specific. We're still on the land.
We have seen the Northlands referred to on a number of occasions, especially as it pertains to the gods and the great beast and the like. So, I mean, I think I'm willing to bet that if this was taking place in Fargo, she would have been Gucci. There would have been no problem there. I mean, I think a good chunk, or the Upper Peninsula. But once you get down far enough, I mean, even
but not that glove shit. No. Only the UP.
That. The mitten is what it is. But if she were in Windsor in Canada, she might be feeling a little bit of a sniffle going on. You know what I mean? I think that's what we're dealing with here.
Okay, so could she go to North Dakota right now?
I just said Fargo. She absolutely could be.
So Canada wouldn't have to take over North Dakota and make it officially part of Canada. It's just that North Dakota is cold and flat.
Well, yeah. And also just to point out, one of the more popular shopping destinations for folks in Grand Forks is just over the border in Canada. North Dakota is practically Canada anyways. And I have a lot of feelings about North Dakota for odd reasons. They can have it. It's cool.
We'll throw in South.
No, I want to keep Mount Rushmore. It's cool. I mean, it's fine.
Dear Mr. President, there are too many states nowadays. Please eliminate 3.
Although I will say there is so much fracking going on in North Dakota that the Roxxon Corporation is 100% all up in that place.
It's just JMH flying through the ground with his suit, just fracking shit up.
Oh my God, that would make so much more sense.
While Shaman is distracted with Diamond Lil, Smart Alex snags Shaman's medicine bag and breaks the unbreakable rule. He looks into it, and that kind of destroys him. There's a cool panel of as he looks into the bag to find out what's going on, and Shaman saying, dude, don't do that. He just freezes, and Smart Alec, there's a 3-panel thing of the same panel just blown up and obviously blown up, and it really kind of adds to the horror of it because apparently with all of his techno guidance and his intelligence, Smart Alec is able to understand what's going inside in the bag before his brain just turns off because he's not supposed to understand things like that. So he's just comatose. He's frozen. And Shaman shrinks him down to like GI Joe size and just puts him in the bag, and we'll deal with him later.
Which is horrifying. Like Shaman just did something really kind of creepy, but we'll move on from there because we like Michael too much to dwell on this. Box, well, there's no other way to put this. Box kicks Sasquatch's ass. He just bodies him. No questions asked. It wasn't even close. I'm not going to say I enjoyed it, and I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it.
And having read through the fight just a little bit closer for this podcast, I think that having lost his bestial like outburst on North Star and then coming back to his senses and being like, "What? Where am I?" I think, and then being immediately teleported. So Box kicks his ass like within 2 minutes of when Walt reasserts himself over the beast. So I'm going to cut Walt some slack here and say that he's out of sorts and he didn't bring his A game because he really should have been able to just rip the arms off a Box and beat him with his own arms.
You're welcome to give him whatever slack you want. I'm good.
So Puck sneaks up on Flashback and takes him out with one punch, saying, "You were always too cocky for your own good, Flashy. Even when we were in beta flight together, you were always forgetting that other than temporal displacement, you've got nothing going for you." So now free from his swarm of flashbacks, Guardian is tackled by Box through a surprise door in the wall and down a long shaft and away from the team.
Meanwhile, Miss Delphine Courtney is peeling away her skin and clothes to reveal she is in fact a robot programmed to help Jackson on behalf of the Roxxon Corporation and leaves the room. Heather follows after her, assuming that there will be a trap.
So Tom, do you think that Jackson ever
wanted to? Absolutely. Did he?
So corporate sex bots as assistants at Roxxon.
Dude, just saying. Trump's America. Trump's corporate 1980s. Convince me otherwise.
Okay, you remember at the end of episode 1 in the Hudson's apartment when Heather was bitching at Mac and saying, "If that hussy makes eyes at you one more time." So he left the job where he hung out with Aurora that his wife didn't like, and now he's at a job where the bosses get access to sex bots.
Oh shit! Maybe that was the surprise meeting, an introduction to his administrative assistant / sex bot.
Oh my god! If you want to destroy a man and you're about to launch this type of attack, how do you do it? How do you make sure that he's A, off his game, and B, feeling the absolute worst about his wife being put in danger? You blackmail him with his own private sex bot right before. Oh my god,
there's not necessarily any.
You are evil, my friend.
There's not necessarily any blackmail here. I mean, it's up to him if he did anything, but like it would definitely make me feel a certain way about the place that I've now moved. I have moved my wife from her home to New York City, to a new country, a new city, for a new job that may or may not be as morally bankrupt as anything I've ever conceived of. And oh, by the way, that corporation is also trying to kill her and me. Super.
Well, I mean, they're a mining gas corporation. They're trying to kill everybody, but they're just trying to do it a little faster for the Hudsons.
There is a very, very good point that JMH has an interesting moral flexibility going on here.
Okay, and before we put Roxxon aside, why aren't they selling these sex bots? Like, wouldn't that be a more like socially friendly thing than selling gas products?
Okay, I think that you think that selling sex robots might be more socially friendly than providing energy is an interesting take.
Okay, hold up. No. I'm saying the downsides of selling sex bots, I think, are smaller than the downsides of selling energy the way that Roxxon is selling the energy. So I'm not saying people don't need energy. Clearly, the sex bots need an energy source, Tom.
Maple syrup.
That's why they want the power source. Oh my god!
There's so much more we can riff on here, but I think that was good, and I think
we'll leave the rest to the interested listener to map out.
Yeah, you know what? You tell us if you want to hear a little mini-sode of us going a little bit deeper on that. But I'm glad we had that moment of levity, of a little joviality. Homestretch, folks. Promise.
As Guardian and Box hit the bottom of the shaft, Box ensures that Guardian takes the brunt of the fall and then rips off Guardian's cybernetic helmet, rendering his suit useless. That's a big problem. As we mentioned earlier, JMH just has the suit. That's it. Now he's just a dude. A few more giant robot punches to his unprotected face later, Box gives us the big reveal. Roger Box, BOCHS, is not in charge of the robot. It is being piloted by Jackson himself.
One note on the art here is that as he's being slapped around, and that's underselling it, he's getting the ever-loving crap beaten out of him.
At one point, Box gives him a North Star special to the back of the head.
A really bad one, like not even just the back of the head, like directly to the brainstem, a true rabbit punch. Something other than a robot hitting you like that can kill you. But JMH is showing battle damage. His face is swollen and bruised. He's almost unrecognizable after a certain amount of time, a certain number of panels. It's very rare to see something like this on the page in a superhero book, this realistic looking result of violence. It kind of sells, not even kind of, it very much sells the hopelessness of the situation. It has a bit of a Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns, Alan Moore Watchmen thing going on. And both those books came out in 86. So I don't know. I'm thinking there might be something in the zeitgeist, an attempt to kind of ground and give greater stakes to the violence that takes place in these books.
When I think about how like Jim Lee might have drawn this, it would never have included a damaged face the way that we see JMH here. You would only ever see Jim Lee violence in terms of like costume injuries, you know, where the costume gets ripped or it was done in shadow or something like that. So yeah, it really underscores, like you said, the hopelessness of it. And it hurts to watch your friend, you know, getting beat up by who we just thought had been a friend, but then turns out to be Jackson. So, in a last-ditch effort, JMH rips apart some vital aspects of his suit and uses his knowledge of how Box is constructed to connect his suit's power supply to a weak point on Box, and manages to cause an explosion and stop the Box robot. Now, with his incredibly damaged suit and probably lifelong brain damage from having been beaten up by a giant bodybuilding robot, JMH is figuring out where he's at.
We cut to Jackson in his wheelchair in a fancy VR helmet as his brain fries. Roger Box is tied on the floor and cheering that he always knew if anyone could beat Box, it was Guardian. Roger is apparently a loyal, nice guy. He really comes across as a good addition to the team here, and we should all enjoy that while it lasts. The badly beaten JMH pulls himself up from the blast and realizes his suit's power pack is too damaged and is going to blow. He says, "I'd say I've got about 10 seconds.
And the next page is, if I had to list a perfect comic book page, this would absolutely be up there in contention. It's a standard 9-panel layout where each panel is shaped like a big squat number, like 987. Each of them shows JMH's face or his hands, what he's doing to the suit and what he's thinking in each second. And as he's disconnecting this lead and making sure he gets to this, and he's talking himself through the procedure very logically. And when you get to the bottom right in the number 1 panel, he thinks to himself, but it's still overheating. I may not. And then there's a page turn and a door behind JMH opens and Heather stumbles into the room. Max says, "Heather, don't come in here, and he explodes. And from within the flames, his charred body crumbles to the ground, limply whispering, "Heather." And then a page turn to the last page of the book, which is a full page of Heather whispering, "Mac," in front of a smoldering pile of ash.
We're going to leave off at this point, dear listeners, and let this moment hang with you a bit. We thought about doing a supplemental episode with our thoughts and reactions to this, but honestly, the book itself will have a real mourning period and address the change in the status quo, so we'll kind of go along with that movement. This issue in 1984 is part of the push by some creators to have more stakes to Marvel Comics by having real changes to the status quo. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways that this is the comics growing up, and that's probably a good thing for the medium as a whole. So join us next time as we examine the fallout from this mission and find out what is next in the tale of Alpha Flight.
Well, Tom, I guess it's time for a bit of a shift here because this leads us to this week's featured patch from the Excelsior Embroidery Company. Because this episode isn't really one I want to make a patch of, I'm showing off this oversized Wolverine skeleton skull and crossbones patch. Visit the whynotpod.com blog to see it along with art clips for this episode and find links to all things Why Not around the web. Leave a comment on the blog. We'd love to try to answer your Alpha Flight questions. And check out excelsiorembroidery.etsy.com for all your embroidered comic nerd needs, like patches, towels, battle vests, and anything else soft enough to hoop.
This episode of Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis, with cat noises provided by a chonk named Teeny. It is produced by Tom Flynn with help from Chris Baker. New episodes are available every other week on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and your preferred podcatcher. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us on your podcast provider. Those are really important to helping fellow fans find our show.
Until next time.